Today is International Design Day, a global initiative established in 1995 by the International Council of Design, celebrated every April 27th and dedicated to making the case for design's essential role in society, culture, and human experience. And this year's International Design Day theme is the Spaces in Between, and it's hosted by the Society for Experiential Graphic Design, SEGD. And we're inviting designers to focus on these thresholds where ideas become experiences and where individuals become communities and where design shapes how we belong, relate, and coexist. And the conversations you're about to hear come from designers and leaders who lives exactly in these spaces. So we're really glad that you're here to join us. And I'm Cybelle Jones, CEO of SEGD. We are a multidisciplinary global community of professionals who design experiences that connect people to place. And it is my privilege to introduce someone who I greatly admire and was able to meet personally a couple years ago in Kansas City, and definitely a follower of Cheryl. So as she is our guest today and one of the most respected leaders in the design world. So a little bit about Cheryl. Cheryl Durst is an honorary FIIDA, and she's Executive Vice President and CEO of the International Interior Design Association, where she has served for nearly 3 decades, growing it to over 15,000 members across 58 countries. That's very impressive. In 2016, she became the first African-American woman inducted into the Interior Design Hall of Fame. She holds 3 honorary doctorates. She serves as a trustee for Chicago's Museum of Contemporary Art, is a voracious reader. So you definitely need to follow her and know what to read, because I'm always like seeing what Cheryl's reading.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be asked. I'm so glad that you all are doing this series of conversations to honor World Design Day. That's amazing.
I know. Well, maybe you'll be next.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea.
Baton.
I love that.
Yeah. I want to start with the theme. And so one of the other speakers in this series is Ngote, who Cheryl also knows well, and he helped us with the theme. And thinking about the work that you do, Cheryl, you're a leader, but you're also really focused on community and advancing equity in the design world, and you champion that. And when you first heard of this theme, the spaces in between, like what resonated for you? Like what came to mind?
I went right to words. Interestingly enough, I'm a reader. I love
a reader.
Yeah, I love all things vocabulary and lexicon. But it occurred to me that the spaces in between words, it supports the legibility of those words. As I thought about legibility and design, for me, it's the spaces in between are what give us clarity, right? It lends legibility to life. And so that was kind of my quick word association for the spaces in between is, we need clarity in life, and design helps give us that. It helps make sense often of what doesn't always make sense in life, and design in all of its incarnations. So design with a capital D.
Okay, that did not cross my mind. I'm thinking you're actually a graphic designer, not an interior designer. Like you're really thinking about it. But it totally makes sense. We were talking about that pause, like even in the design process when you like have the gap when nobody speaks and you kind of let things settle and germinate and we don't do that enough anymore. I like the way that you think about the separation and giving things time.
Yeah.
Right. And thinking about specifically, you're leading in the field of interior design, and so much of that work is about people moving in space and how spaces unfold. Do spaces lend themselves to the kinds of activities that people should be doing? We were like,
clarity.
You think of, clarity.
Yeah.
Like is okay. You want me, and I've heard this actually with someone who's doing research with workspaces, and there's this thing that's happening where people are in office say 3 days a week, but they're just swiping in and they're making an appearance and then they're leaving. And so when they actually got into the research of why they were leaving, it was like, well, acoustically, the space didn't feel comfortable, or lighting wise, or with the AC, or the, the way in which the space was designed wasn't a place to kind of hang. It was like a place to move through. So when you think about the discipline you represent, like, how do people understand the real stakes of that work? Because for those that aren't designers, I don't know that anyone appreciates the pains and anguish and efforts and prototyping that we go through in trying to figure out how to make those spaces so they actually function.
Yeah. Well, and it's that ever-present connection between people, place, and purpose. And, I think a lot of people stop at aesthetics, but interior design is especially about, I've got lighting doing weird things. Interior design is especially about what happens on the receiving end. And so that being thoughtful about how people are moving through a space, what they're experiencing while they're in that space. Now I look like I'm in witness protection. It's the automatic off on of my lights.
Oh,
so,
you have to keep moving around.
A little bit. But Lost in Space wasn't just a great television show from the 60s, right? We sometimes find ourselves lost in a space. And I think particularly now that the world of work has so changed, the workplace or places where we work, they have ritual, they have protocol. We don't always know what's expected of us. I think people don't always know what's expected of them in a place. And so being sure that a space communicates what should happen here. Thoughtfulness happens here. Work happens here. Productivity happens here. Community happens here. And I think we need to be a bit more deliberate and intentional about what happens in a space, but also safety happens here. Knowing that you will be safe when you enter this space, physically safe, emotionally safe. Your data will be safe, right? That the messaging around place, there is a greater burden on everyone who designs space to make sure that space is communicating what happens here, and then leave room for iteration, right? Spaces may be used in ways that designers didn't intend. And it doesn't mean that those ways are necessarily bad, but the space needs to be flexible enough and resilient enough to allow for that.
Yeah, I think resilient is a great word. Being a former museum exhibition designer, I always said we didn't design with agility. Like, things change.
Yeah.
Content changes, perspective changes. And it's hard to allow for those spaces to also expand and contract. I mean, that's the tricky part that I hear about workplaces. If you come in on a day that nobody else is there or hardly anybody else is there, that has one kind of feeling.
That's right.
If you come in on a day when it's packed, which is great because you got a lot of people there, but everybody is in front of their screen because they're all doing webinars. Well, is that community? And so how does the space ritual? I want to land on that for a minute, because the serendipity of meeting, I meet you when I'm refilling my tea. And we talk about what we did over the weekend, and then that spurs something related to a project that you're working on that you're like stuck. And so we have this iterative thing that was unplanned, but it's because of the place that we landed, because everybody's going to hang in the kitchen or whatever.
Right.
I think those spaces in between sometimes are the most important space. Right.
Yeah. What are you incubating? What are you nurturing? What are you amplifying? And, some of that is unintentional. It's that beautiful thing that happens when human beings, are bouncing ideas off of one another. That's where co-working culture kind of got that right pre-pandemic. Because right, thinking about the workplace as a hive, a really productive hive, and people are bouncing ideas off of one another. Just being in proximity to idea generation happening will cause us to be more innovative. So being thoughtful about that, right? But you're right. There is the for some offices, the Monday factor or the Friday factor. When people aren't in the office, that becomes your heads down day,
Yeah.
because there may be fewer people to bounce ideas off of. And it may be a very intentional heads down day. I think that that's become very interesting in our world. The days of the week have taken on characteristics, and Tuesdays and Thursdays become the heavy work day. Wednesday is kind of the liminal in between day, literally, and Mondays and Fridays. The people who do come in on those days are very serious about getting work done.
Yeah. And it's also, it's such a personality thing too.
It
Like
is a
when I
personality
come
thing.
into the office, the people that come here first like it dark, so they don't turn the lights on, and that drives me crazy. I'm like, "What are you guys, like, working? You don't have the lights on?" Because for me, I need daylight, I need bright light, I'm very sensitive to that. The other thing of, like, don't turn the music on because it's gonna
Uh,
distract me, I need quiet, I need loud, what I mean?
yeah.
Things that, are all the subtleties of the field of practice of creating a space for people to be able to do what they need to do there,
Yeah.
right? And do it well. And it's typically when you don't notice that it's designed really well,
Uh-huh.
right? Because it's like it all feels great.
But it's,
But I
it's what Bruce Mal said, design is invisible until it fails, right?
until
Until
it fails, yeah.
something goes wrong.
Yeah.
That's when we notice it, when the vibe is off, or you're too hot, or you're
Yeah.
too cold, or the light's not
Right.
great, or
So let's think about those who often don't have a voice, maybe to express what does welcoming design look like? Even what is good design? We had a winner, I think 2 years ago with our SEGD Design Awards that was a public housing program that was so beautifully designed. And mostly the jurors were like, and it was in Australia, and the jurors were like, why don't we do this in the US?
mm,
Like, why doesn't everyone deserve, it doesn't have to be, all of it doesn't have to cost the same amount, but why can't everyone have good design? Because if you could design a really great DMV, wouldn't everybody be happier and nicer?
right, right. Or
Just
affordable housing. It
affordable
just
housing.
because it's
Yeah.
affordable doesn't mean that it needs to look less than, right? And I think that that is sometimes people fall into a trap thinking that, design for a certain category or for certain kinds of people needs to be less than, and design is so intrinsically tied to dignity
I was going
that,
to say that,
yeah,
right?
it's so
How you
intrinsic.
feel about
It's how
yourself
you
when you
feel about
walk out
yourself.
the front door.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. An object that we hold, a functional object, a piece of technology, should never make us feel less than or less smart or less capable, any more than an interior that we walk in it should never make us feel as if we don't belong there or less than capable. So this conversation around design for all is still very much a valid conversation, particularly through the lens of equity and belonging.
Cheryl, how do you encourage practitioners? Because oftentimes, time and budget. And so clients aren't maybe inclined. I mean, maybe they'd like to in an ideal world, but maybe they're not inclined to make that really part of the program or part of the directive. How does the design community, how do we step up and bring that to the forefront and make it a conversation?
Yeah, I think it's talking about design in terms of being life-centric, right? It's about living the best, most dignified lives as possible. And so what amplifies you as a human being, regardless of whether you're a human being who doesn't hear as well as the human being next to you, or you're in a wheelchair, or whatever the difference might be, it's this being life-centric to all and being able to communicate that to clients. I think clients may have fallen into this rut of thinking, I need to think about, quote unquote, people with disabilities or people with
Right.
differences. That's not the answer. It is designed for all. And considering the edges in the overall scope of design, you consider the edges, right? Strategy happens on the edges. you get design for all. And so it's life-centric as opposed to a specific silo-centric, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You're completely accurate. And when I worked on projects that were highly directive on how accessible they were, like say, for example, with the National Park Service, people would say, oh, we have to do all this. And then you see the project open and tactile models were required for sight impaired. But guess what? Kids love them. Adults love tactile. People love models. you know, they can understand themselves in scale and in perspective and context when you provide those things. I mean, I have a husband who's, younger than me. He's been hard of hearing his whole life. People don't treat him like they're shocked because they expect, well, that's someone who's older. And, it's all the different degrees too,
It's all
right?
different
It's
degrees.
not completely like take my glasses off and I can't.
Right.
I can't function.
Right. The gradations. Curb cuts are one of the best examples.
Yes.
Someone was being thoughtful about mobility impaired people and wheelchairs, but curb cuts work for everybody.
Strollers.
Yeah.
Klutzes. I'm a klutz. You are doing such amazing things between sharing, the books that you're reading, but you also interview a lot of really interesting people, and you've done that through the years. And I love that you're interviewing people outside of the design world. So what did those cross-disciplinary conversations teach you about connection and community? And what can we take away from that, that design can't do alone?
I think those multidisciplinary conversations, they up the ante for all of us on our curiosity acumen. Talking about climate change and environmental stewardship with the design community is an incredible conversation. But if you all of a sudden introduce a meteorologist to that conversation and looking at shifts in climate through the eyes of a meteorologist or a forest ranger or a firefighter. And so I love getting multiple points of view on issues that confront us as an industry. I mean, there are issues that confront humanity, obviously. But the more diverse our conversations are, I think the wider the pool for solution finding exists. And so just being curious about what other professions or people or schools of thought bring to the table, I think the more that any of us can kind of gather multiple points of view, the better for the solution that we're working toward. Or sometimes it's just a better conversation.
We were talking in another conversation today for International Design Day about advocacy, and the International Design Day was conceived to, get across the word that design affects everybody, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't think about design as an option when they go to school. They don't know a designer. Their parents don't know a designer.
Right.
Nobody's sure that's really a good
Yeah.
choice. And I think it's put us in a situation where we could do so much better on behalf of our cities and communities and resiliency and everything from education to healthcare and crime if we were able to sit at the table as you are with people to talk about what the problems are and how we as a design community can work with other people, the meteorologists, the educators. How do we make that happen? I mean, how have you strategically in your leadership begun to make those moves to bring in others outside of our design community?
I think there's an element of just ask. It's amazing how many, well, it's not amazing actually. People want to talk about design. Probably many of them don't understand how design is so intrinsically connected to the human condition. But what I have found is whether it's an accountant or a meteorologist or a playwright or a second grade teacher, the human condition is of utmost importance to most people in most professions. And a lot of people are having conversations that they don't realize are design conversations. And so I think the burden is often on us as a profession to be very revelatory about the impact that we have on human beings. And
Yes.
I am a huge fan of designers in public office. We have several members who are grassroots activists, sit on planning boards, planning commissions. We have at least 3 members right now who are mayors of the city that they live in. They ran on a design-centric campaign with that very kind of mindset that design is about humanity. And design is essential to humanity. And so this conversation about design being essential to how we live, work, play, heal, learn, right? Every aspect of being human, there is a intrinsic design connection to. And I think we just need to be better as practitioners in articulating that and again, being revelatory.
That is fantastic. And I hope that's a call for those young people. I have, we both you have a daughter, right?
I have a daughter and a
Yeah.
son. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But I remember saying at like high school graduation to like, okay, you guys are going to like go and like get into politics. And they were like, absolutely not. But we do need people that are creative thinkers. And, designers are great problem solvers. And they
Yeah.
also have to bring people along because you don't design anything in the singular. Like you have to collaborate. You've got to work with, the architect, the interiors, the engineers, the lighting people, the curator, the owner,
That's right.
Transportation.
All those people, designers are great air traffic controllers, not literally, but in the figurative
Yes.
sense of you're managing so many stakeholders and understanding the agenda of all of those stakeholders. I can't think of a better analogy for sitting at a table where politics is the central conversation. And there's great distrust now in probably at the federal level, but the activist grassroots right at a city level. And I had mentioned planning commissions,
Right.
hospital boards, library boards, where you are in direct contact with grassroots. I mean, that is where we're seeing designers getting most involved. Designers excel at making sense out of systems and networks. Again, back to legibility.
Yeah, and complexity.
And
right.
complexity.
They take
chaos.
the complex and chaos. Yes. I said that's why I was never bored a day in my career, is because I always had things way too complicated and way over my head to try to figure out and distill down and communicate back. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
One of my favorite things when I am in a room with designers and their clients, and one of my favorite things to hear a client say is, I never thought about it that way. That's what design does. That's what designers do, is they help people think and they help people see things in ways they have not seen them before. That's the essence of problem solving.
Yeah. Well, this is incredibly inspiring and a great call to action, which I've kind of been looking for. I mean, that's in a way when we came up with the theme, it was that call to action to think beyond like object in space or purely form and aesthetic, but really the why.
Yeah.
It's what drives, I know, my members and your members to do what we do. So thinking about that, like responsibility and hope and some of the examples you were giving, like what have you seen that you're like, yes, that's a great approach, or that's a great idea, or I never would have thought about that, but wow, look at how that turned out.
I'm thinking particularly, to borrow from the Hippocratic Oath, right? Do no harm, which is exactly the business of design, is to do no harm. And so I'm thinking in the realm of environmental stewardship, and, we're seeing, some urgency around product declarations, right? Designers have to be incredibly mindful of, in that, we're not causing harm physically or emotionally to the inhabitants of a space, thinking about the components of that space. And for sure, designers are not chemists or biologists, but this understanding around what you're putting into a space can also do no harm. And so within that realm, we're seeing product declarations, material product declarations, environmental product declarations, where manufacturers are now listing the components of materials that have been specified. And so floor covering, wall covering, knowing exactly what is in those components that designers are specifying, that, that gives me a lot of hope that we're being more transparent about what we're putting in those spaces, but also the movement around considering all. And so with clients even reacting to wanting to create spaces that are accommodating for all levels within neurodiversity, right? And so again, it's not just how a space looks, but how it feels to all of those who encounter that space. And then leaning into the fact that space to me is a physical construct. Place is emotional. And so when people understand when space transitions into place, the meaning that holds for us, from a heart and soul standpoint.
It's those things that you just feel.
That you just
you
feel.
can't express, right?
Yeah. It's life
the
affirming.
restaurant you love to go to because of the way it feels. Sometimes it's not even better food. It's just,
it felt good.
It's your, yeah.
Yeah. It felt good. And that matters, right? That is not less than a regenerative space or thinking about the life cycle of a space. All of those things matter. How a space begins and how it ends, because, right, we know that on the corporate side, leases are shorter. And so people are thinking about, how am I going to dispose of? How am I going to reuse? That matters, but it also matters how that space feels to its inhabitants. And designers are having to take all of those things into consideration.
Yeah. And I think the reuse, I was actually on a panel for a logo for reuse, which is going to be launched internationally, I think, in the next month. And we dispose of so much in our industry across all the design spectrums and construction. And so beginning to think about how we can repurpose and, that's exciting what I'm seeing coming out of that. And even with architecture in DC, we have a lot of buildings that are going from office to residential. And I know it's challenging, functionally in plumbing and electrical. But when you see that, it really does reactivate, the streets and the communities. And so we shouldn't be shy. Sometimes things are harder. We're going to go into a lightning round. But before that, Cheryl, I want to pick your brain. What should we be reading? Thinking about spaces in between and design. What would you recommend?
So I have a favorite book that I have been recommending. It's been out for a few years, but it is called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. It is the art of convening people. And how do we effectively do that? And everything from a Thanksgiving dinner to a meeting to a corporate board of directors meeting. What does it mean when you have people in place or via Zoom, right? The hybrid meetings are convenings as well. What is the quality of that experience? And how can we better enable and design the experience of convening people? The Art of Gathering. It is an absolutely brilliant book.
Okay, this is definitely something that's pushing me because you're like the third person. And I saw when I was trying to clean up my Audible because I have not enough memory, it was there. And I'm like, I got it. So now I absolutely have to. Yes. Yeah. So quick answers: a space, physical, digital, or emotional, that you think is almost perfectly designed for human connection.
A library.
Oh, you're not the only one to say that. You'll have to watch all the videos to know who else. Oh, it is a great space. Okay. A space that desperately needs a redesign.
So many underutilized streets in cities. There's just poorly used streetscapes and parks. I think it's time to rethink how we think about kind of pedestrian walkways.
One word that describes what great interior design feels like when it's working.
Seamless.
The intangible skill you wish design school taught.
The ability to read the room.
That's also come up a lot.
Has it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in regards to, and I know you're also passionate about this, emerging professionals, that if you are a new graduate and you're starting off work completely remote, that's what you miss
Mhm.
because you don't like you learn from your boss or other leaders that you are observing like what goes and what doesn't go. And I
Yeah.
remember that so distinctly as a young designer, just taking notes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Reading the room it's just analogous to reading people and understanding subtext. We get context very often, but understanding the subtext of what is happening in a conversation or a pitch to a
Yeah.
client. Yeah.
Okay. Complete the sentence. Design fails when blank.
Design fails when it prioritizes aesthetics over people.
Design succeeds when
Design succeeds when it solves a problem and celebrates humanity
mm, oh,
concurrently.
this is why you're so good at your job, Cheryl. Okay, so let's hear what's happening on the IIDA front. What are you doing? What's happening? What should people be checking out? What's exciting you?
We are really leaning into with our webinars and with our programs that we're doing, and I'm certainly with my speaking engagements, leaning into joy in work, joy in design, designing with joy. So we're really leaning into joy and comfort and optimism because they often get forgotten, right? And it's during complex times, it often feels frivolous or selfish to think about joy, but joy is a requirement. And so you will see IIDA companioned with the words joy and comfort and optimism quite a bit. But we're also leaning into the future. We debuted our certified design futurist curriculum last year. So we've now had 4 cohorts of courses of students come through our course. And it's all about strategic foresight and which is a very disciplined and rigorous methodology to approach and analyze and assess the future through a series of scenarios. And it is all about resilience and preparedness. So on one hand, I talk about joy and optimism, but the other, resilience and preparedness. We should all be prepared for a future. Well, and I do firmly believe that designers are futurists. You are working with your clients not only on their what's now, but their what's next. And our Certified Design Futurist program gives you the tools and resources to approach that with a methodology.
That's fantastic. Well, I completely agree with the joy, and we're leaning that way and into our heart. And I know personally for me, I live in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
All we talk about here is politics and
Yeah.
divided and divisive. And I made a pact with myself. I have a little thing that I put up every year, a different saying. And, it's like find the joy in the day.
Mm.
And I'm assuming you know Joy Bailey Bryant at
Oh, yeah.
Lord Cultural. And her name and my mom's name was Joy. And,
Oh,
and I, you have to bring it because no matter what you're facing, I mean, Bruce Mal just said when we were in Chicago last year, he said, you can't give up hope. You
right.
have to be, like enthusiastic about finding a, a way to solve a problem. And
Mhm.
certainly for our community, that's what we do well. We talking about the future. You can't think about the future if you can't have audacious thoughts, like totally insane, right? That
Yeah.
could never
Yeah.
happen. Well, it could
It
actually,
could.
maybe it could. So
Yeah.
why don't we just allow our imagination to go there and to think about the possibilities? And not all those things have to be um, negative. We've certainly turned a lot of things around by great design, and we
Yeah.
can change the human condition
Yeah. Yeah.
through working together.
Yeah. And it may not always feel like it, but I certainly believe that designers are inherently optimists, right? There is a future, I think, that we all as practitioners, we all as design organizations, believe in a preferred future for humanity, and we work toward that. I don't know that you necessarily could be life affirming, leaning toward humankind if you aren't an optimist. And so that gives me hope every day that I am blessed and fortunate to be part of a profession that leans toward optimism.
God, Cheryl, you're so right. And I look at my community, they are doing their job because they believe so strongly in it. Like,
that's right. That's
they're
right.
just so passionate, and
Yeah.
it's the little train that could, and I have to choose, am I going to be the pessimist, or am I going to be, or am I going to be that train trying to chug up the hill? But you're out there. You're way ahead of me, Cheryl. I'm trying to keep up. You're doing such amazing work. Like, we appreciate it. So I know as leaders, oftentimes you don't get thanked and you don't get acknowledged because you're like, it's my job. Of course I'm doing this. But
Yeah.
you do it with such wisdom and passion and clarity and kindness. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Well, thank
And
you.
thanks.
Thank you for the honor of this ask. This was lovely to have a conversation with you, and celebrate that which we love, design.
I know, design. So on behalf of the International Council of Design and Design Day, thank you, Cheryl. And we can't wait for the next conversation.
Yeah. Cheers.
Wonderful. Cheers.